Potato chips, I mean, what? They've been around forever. But when did it actually start? When did this like potato chips thing start?
Fried potatoes have been around for a very long time, but specifically potato chips. They were born in Saratoga Springs, New York in 1853 by a guy called George Crumb. And it was actually born by accident. It was at a restaurant in Saratoga, and one of the customers was complaining about how thick the potatoes were. So the chef, George, out of frustration, he just back to the kitchen and he sliced the potatoes as slim as he could possibly do at the time. And he just fried them, put some salt on them, and sent them back to that customer. And people loved it. And it exploded in popularity from that place. And they even started to sell it to like other restaurants and hotels. And
Really, eh?
it became a whole phenomenon back then. And it started that whole trend of potato chips.
Really? I have two questions now.
Yeah.
So the customer was eating like fries?
It was like a fries, yes, obviously a lot thicker and different than what we associate fries with. And that was what's common at the time for potatoes, really.
I feel like New York is the birthplace for so many food topics we've covered.
It doesn't make sense that something like this did not exist before, but at the same time, it makes sense that it is New York because at the time, this is the beginning of the United States and this is the new world, and a lot of people migrating from Europe into America to start
Right.
their lives there again. And when you land in the US, you're landing in New York.
Okay, so this guy in 1853, New York, he started this. What happened next? How did it get to the scale that we see now?
So from then until 1926, it was sold in big bulk barrels in metal tins to hotels, other restaurants. And one of the main problems that they had is that the chips would get stale very quickly because all you're doing is you're putting it in a metal can and you're closing it. There's no proper sealing. So one of the fixes that propelled chips into more popularity is in 1926 when Laura Scruder invented essentially wax paper made bags. She actually asked her employees at the time to take the material with them and iron them at home and form them into bags and then come back and then use them the day after to pack them with potato chips.
Nice.
So this female entrepreneur started doing that, and that improved the quality of potato chips and allowed better transportation because now they last for a lot longer.
Ah, yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so she did wax paper. We also have a female entrepreneur in 1926.
And I think this may have been the first female entrepreneur we mentioned in our podcast. I don't think we've had one before. I don't remember anyway. So the following milestone is in 1954 by Joe Murphy. He was an Irish businessman. He kind of grew sick of how plain and dull the potato chips were at the time, crisps, as they call them in Ireland. And at the time, potato chips come in with a packet of salt inside the bag. So the only flavor they
Oh,
had was salted, and it wasn't even salted. You would have to open up the packet and put the salt on them yourself. So
gotcha.
Joe Murphy kind of grew sick of that and he wanted to kind of innovate in that space. And he was a businessman. So he found a way to add different flavors directly onto the chips in the manufacturing process. And what essentially he did, he would take any flavor he wanted. And by the way, the first flavor ever created of chips besides salt was cheese and onion. He would
Okay.
convert those flavors into powder, dissolve them into liquid, and then he would spray them over the chips. And boom, flavored chips were created.
Yum. So here's the reason we have ketchup lays. Okay, so we reached 1954. We now have flavors introduced. What happens now?
After that, in 1982, kettle cooked chips were invented. So
Okay.
they were invented by a guy called Cameron Healy, and he invented the company brand Kettle Foods. They are the founders, essentially, of kettle chips, and they found a different way to prepare and cook the chips that allow them to be crispier and have artisanal, homemade chips that we're familiar with.